architect Divya Chakravarti. She completed her undergraduate studies from SRM University and she went on to pursue her master's in historic preservation and urbanism and study of the built environment from the University of California, Los Angeles. She went on to work for the Department of Planning and Preservation for the city of Pasadena, California. She also did a brief stint of work for Historic Scotland, Edinburgh, UK. She had also worked on conservation projects like Kalsa Mahal, Gokhale Hall in Chennai, and Marimalappa Educational Trust in Mysore. She is currently working as a director of Samrakshan Heritage Consultancy. She is also a co-founder of the Artisan Reprisal of Traditional Materials, Method and Technology. She goes on to conduct workshops to revive traditional and lost methods of construction.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series for Bachelors of Architecture. The subject we are discussing is environmental science, and the topic we will be delving into is Introduction to Environmental Studies and Natural Resources. In this lecture, we will study the benefits and problems of dams, mineral resources, use and exploitation of mineral resources, environmental effects of extracting and mining, impact of dams. A dam is a structure which prevents the flow of water and accumulates it in a reservoir. So, these are two typical dams that you would see built in our world. These dams are considered to be world property in certain areas, and in certain areas it comes under the jurisdiction of the country, the central government in our country, and not irrespective of the state governments. Needs for dam construction: drinking and domestic water supply, flood control, irrigation, industrial water supply, hydroelectric energy production, retention and control of sediments, and inland navigation, improvement of water quality, fish farming and recreation facilities. So, one of the main reasons for dam construction happens is because of agriculture and irrigation. Some areas do not get any water and they do not have sufficient groundwater to supply for them. So, they are dependent on other levels of or other forms of water to irrigate their fields and farms. And because of that, dams are constructed, because an artificial reservoir will be created from which channels and canals can take the water to the relevant areas. This can also be used for industrial supply of water, because those areas, a dam is usually built obviously not in the heart of an urban area. It is in such an area which is surrounded by forests or middle of nowhere types near a river that is usually prone to flooding in a particular point. And as a dam is constructed, to make the dam productive, it can be used to produce hydroelectric energy production. So, the needs of a dam needn't necessarily be mutually exclusive. All these 6 uses can be taken from a particular dam, or even just 1 or 2. So, it is not mutually exclusive, and all of the requirements for having a dam needn't necessarily be an immediate requirement, and they do have a lot of benefits, but at the same time there are a lot of bad consequences if the dam is not constructed at the right place or even at the right time with the right materials. Environmental impacts of dams: it can actually have major impacts are river pollution, erosion, loss of aesthetic views, air pollution, noise pollution and dust. Like we just mentioned, dams are usually built in the middle of forest reserves or near obviously on the river at a point of time where at a point or a place where the water is excluding, creating flooding in an area, or a particular region is not getting adequate water for irrigation. So, when a dam is built across a river, a lot of problems do occur. Loss of natural habitat for a lot of creatures, because a forest area has to be cleared if a dam has to be built, and for the dam to be constructed, a lot of construction material has to go to and fro. Because of that, a large road or a pathway has to be laid, and which again leads to cutting of trees, which will lead to erosion. Loss of aesthetic view. A construction of dam is not an overnight process, it takes a couple of years at least. and this entire time period that forest is going to be badly utilized without any jurisdictional power of anybody. The construction workers will set up home over there till the work is going on. They will set up home in haphazard fashion without giving consideration to the forest or the river. So you will have a lot of pollution that is happening in the water, air, as well as noise because of the kind of machinery that is used. And noise pollution, you might think, is only affects human beings, which is not true. Certain birds cannot hear beyond a certain decibel of noise. If that particular decibel of noise is crossed, their brains actually explode and the birds will end up dying. Bees cannot pollinate. So a lot of plants could become extinct. Bees will will have devastating effects. The bees might end up dying. So a lot of these problems occur because of a construction of a dam. So the pros of constructing a dam there must heavily be exceeding these cons that will come up. Effects of dam to water quality. Main is change in temperature, turbidity, that is the quality of the color of the water, dissolved gases in water. Water discharged from the spillway contains 110 to 120% saturated nitrogen. This amount may be destructive for fish life. Eutrophication, it means increase in vegetation. If moss and other plants exist in water, quality of water gets worse, because as the water is running, it is only then that it is healthy and plant and animal life, that is fishes and other creatures, can survive, because in running water the level of oxygen will be perfect. But if the water becomes clogged with planktons and different kinds of vegetation, the water becomes sluggish, slow, and it will lead to the death of a lot of fishes and underwater life. The physical and biological effects of dams. Physical changes downstream, that is flow, temperature regimes and water clarity. Deep release dams most adverse effects, and therefore changes in physical and chemical conditions resulting in changes in animal and plant life of the river. Water quality changes downstream depends on how long the water is kept in the reservoir or if surface or deep water is released from the dam. Dams break natural upstream and downstream connectivity and periodic flow in the rivers. And so because of this, usually how rivers work is they flow from upstream, gradually reach downstream, and as they reach downstream, the soil that is collected there is considered very fertile, and that area is usually becomes a delta which helps a lot in agriculture because the soil is very fertile. Now along that river, along the course of the river, if a dam or even two dams are constructed, the quality of the water, that is the fertility of the soil, finally is going to be affected, as the nutrients or the fertile soil that the river brings from upstream is tremendously reduced or is trapped in the reservoir that is in the dam. Presence of reservoirs or dams affects the flow regime of the river, and hence transport of fine sediments and fine particles on the stream bed is altered. Inflowing sediments settle out in the reservoir, depleting storage capacity. High discharge dams cause scouring of fine particles and armoring of stream bed, that is surface substances become tightly compacted, as well as changes in the channel form, that is you have bank erosion, cutting down of stream beds, elimination of plants and fauna. So once the effect is felt on biological life, it can have a lot of other extrinsic and intrinsic effects caused due to it, and it cannot be measured at a particular point of time. Now when you know that the water quality is changing, that can be quantified, but when it starts affecting flora and fauna, that becomes beyond getting quantified, and it can lead to a lot of other changes. Low discharge dams, they actually have a reduced flow. So they actually end up having increased algae or phytoplanktons, which blooms and develops greater abundance of higher plants, that is aquatic moss. These favors midges and algiophates, these mayflies shift, and all of this lead to a lot of problems in the aquatic life. Reservoirs and dams impede the upstream downstream migration of fish, that is example are salmon and eels. Damage of fish by water pressures and turbines. So when a reservoir is built, and the reservoir is quite large for it to actually have a lot of under river water life amongst itself. But once the reservoirs are opened without any, because the fish cannot be intimated that okay, we are going to open the reservoirs, because there is a sudden change in pressure, the fish get crushed, they die, and even the other supporting life also ends up dying. And because of that, there are other intrinsic and factors that are leading to this, and this affects the biological cycle of the water life in the dam. Decrease in species richness of benthic invertebrates, but an increase in abundance due to altered physical chemical environment, below impoundment, and a reduction in habitat heterogeneity. So what happens is the different types of creatures reduce, but individually one species could become over prolific. That is, one particular species which is suitable for that temperature, that climate, will end up growing in abundance, but other heterogeneous species or indigenous species to that area will get affected. Dams and other forms of river regulation have many negative effects on rivers and streams, causing changes in community structure as well as the function of the ecosystem. The naturally free-flowing and continuous river course is transformed into an unnatural uniform river segment. The argument in favor of dams and many river regulation schemes is that it brings huge human economic benefits. Moving on to mineral resources. A mineral resource is defined as an occurrence of natural, solid, inorganic or fossilized organic material in or on the earth's crust in such a form and quantity and of such a grade or quality that it has reasonable prospects for economic extraction. Now, if you look at the national mineral scenario in our country produces as much as 87 minerals, which includes 4 fuel, 10 metallic and 47 non-metallic, 3 atomic and 23 minor minerals, which includes building and other materials that are related like mica. India possesses a large variety of mineral ores in fairly huge quantities. India is rich in coal, manganese, iron, chromites and mica. It is deficient in gold, silver, nickel, etc. So, if you look at the estimated expiry of minerals, it depends on 2 things. Number 1, the size of the reserve and the rate at which we are using it up. So, if you actually look at our coal reserve, it is estimated life is 200 to 300 years and our main use is electricity. But if you look at it, there are some which are going, tin for example has an estimated expiry in about 31 years, lead in about 25 years and oil, which is most depressing, is 50 years, which is our main consumption. And ore is a mineral or combination of minerals from which a useful substance such as a metal can be extracted and then further used to manufacture a useful product. This is a sample of a gold ore that you see here. Minerals are formed over a period of millions of years in the earth's crust. Use and exploitation. The main uses of minerals are as follows. First, you have the development of industrial plants and machinery. Second, generation of energy, that is could be coal, lignite or nuclear uranium energy. Construction, housing, settlements, defense equipments, weapons, armaments. So, these are the main uses of minerals. Then you have the bi-ancillary things are transportation, communication like telephone wires, cables, electronic devices, medicinal system particularly in the Ayurvedic system, formation of alloys for various purposes, example phosphorite. Agriculture such as fertilizers, seed dressings, fungicides like zineb containing zinc and maneb containing manganese, etc. Jewelry, gold, silver, platinum and diamond. Based on their properties, minerals are basically of 2 types. Non-metallic minerals, that is graphite, diamond, quartz, feldspar. Metallic minerals are bauxite, laterite, hematite, etc. So, if you look at the classification, Distribution and uses of major non-metallic and minerals are given below. Here you have aluminium. This is completely some of the major metallic ores that we have: aluminium, chromium, copper, iron, lead, manganese. The platinum group you have gold, silver and nickel, and unfortunately we are lacking in most of these except aluminium. These you have the non-metal minerals: silicates, limestone, gypsum, potash, phosphorite, which is mainly used for fertilizers, and sulfur pyrites is used as medicine, car battery and in industries. So, in silicate and limestone we are quite well, we have good distribution of silicate and limestone materials. Some major minerals of India: the energy generating minerals, we have coal and lignite in the west, in Bengal, Jharkhand, Orissa, Madhya Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh. Uranium, that is pitch blende or uranite ore, again you have this in Jharkhand, Andhra Pradesh, in Meghalaya, Rajasthan. Other commercially used materials: aluminium is the bauxite ore, we have this in Jharkhand, West Bengal, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh as well as Tamil Nadu. Iron, that is hematite and magnetite ores, you have Jharkhand, Orissa, Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Maharashtra and Goa. Copper and copper pyrites, that is the ore is copper pyrites, we find in Rajasthan, Bihar, Jharkhand, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh and Uttaranchal. Moving on to the environmental impacts of mineral extraction and use. The issue related to the limits of mineral resources in our Earth's crust in the ocean is not so significant. More important environmental concerns arises from the impacts of extraction and processing of these minerals during mining, smelting, etc. Indian scenario: India is the producer of 84 minerals, the annual value of which is about 50,000 crores. At least 6 major mines need a mention here, which are known for causing severe problems. Jaduguda uranium mine in Jharkhand, it has been exposing local people to radioactive hazards for many years. The Jharia coal mines in Jharkhand, again, underground fire leading to land subsidence and forced displacement of people, because once a mine comes in that area, that land becomes very useful and goes beyond value. All mines belong to the government in our country, and because of that they can sell the land to the government, and once they discover a mineral or a mineral ore in that area, people are forcefully displaced by giving them pittance, because the mineral is going to give them so much more money. So, it leads to a lot of social issues as well as a result of this. The Sukhinda chromite mines in Orissa, this has been seeping hexavalent chromium into the river, posing serious health hazards. CR6 plus is highly toxic and very carcinogenic, and this affects the groundwater completely. Kudremukh iron ore mine in Karnataka, this has been causing river pollution and it has been a threat to biodiversity for a very long time. East Coast bauxite mine in Orissa, again, land encroachment and issue of rehabilitation unsettled. Northeastern coal fields at Assam, very high sulfur contamination. This again affects the land as well as the water. Impacts of mining as such: mining is done to extract minerals or fossil fuels from deep deposits in the soil by using subsurface mining, or from shallow deposits by surface mining. The former method is more destructive, dangerous and expensive, includes risks of occupational hazards and accidents. Effects of mining on the environment: deforestation and loss of biodiversity are major effects of mining. It destroys the forests and the wetlands. We saw the effect it had and went through forest resources and the impact it has in forest resources. Many mines require tailing dams to prevent waste being washed into rivers. Unethical miners can dispense with the dams to save costs, resulting in massive pollution downstream. And this downstream water is what is used for irrigation, and if polluted water, that is chemically polluted water, is going to be used for irrigation, it is not only the soil that gets contaminated, but also the crops that get contaminated, which are going to be consumed by people. In other cases, the tailing dams can overflow and even breach, during periods of heavy rain. Underground coal mining can require the removal of almost an entire layer of material deep under the surface. So, this leads to even disposition of soil and makes the soil or the land weak in that area. Some mining involves the inadvertent dispersal of heavy metals such as lead into the atmosphere. This can lead to serious health effects including mental retardation in children, and there are recorded cases, increased cases where people actually settle down near minefields, workers, that is children of workers who are exposed to this dust in the air. Asbestos mining caused the dispersal of asbestos into the environment. This causes deaths among local residents and workers, often several decades later. Asbestos poisoning is felt very gradually, not immediate, but it has dire consequences as well. We didn't even realize about the negative aspects of asbestos till recently. Asbestos completely corrodes the lining of the lungs and actually distresses lung syndrome. It's called one of the main causes, and as a result of this, people actually have constant breathing issues, asthma related issues, and especially in children. So, we have to see how the environment protection forms as a part of planning and design for obtaining approvals and lease of contemporary Indian mines, thereby benefiting both the mining industry as well as a community as a whole. We have a certain perceptions about mining. So, we have to deal with those perceptions first before we go about discussing how we go about solving the problems. Overlapping of interests amongst the three, that is mineral reserves, forest cover and tribal zones. Economic and social benefits of mining are not apparent. There is social dissatisfaction and unrest among the people towards the mining. The legal and regulatory policies regarding mining and the environment are inadequately factored, focusing majorly on long-term impacts. Too much pressure on land, air, water, forests and biodiversity due to excessive demand. Overall life quality of people gets damaged. Lack of enforcement and successful implementation of existing sustainable mining policies. So, when you go about looking at mining as an occupation, number one, the main reason is even the people working in the industry are getting affected by it. They are not made aware of the consequences of working in such a mine. They end up being uneducated people who just know that they are getting paid X amount of money at the end of the day without realizing that without following certain precautions, they can actually be endangering not only themselves, but also their family, especially children. So, if you actually look about it, we have discussed, yes, we get about 50,000 crores from different minerals and mines in our country, and for a developing country like India, that amount is definitely not negligible. But the social benefits of mining are definitely not obvious. On the other extreme, there are a lot of negative impacts not only on health, but also on the social community structure, because people are forced to be displaced from that area, and because all mines and mineral ores are owned by the government, the land which people live on is bought for pittance, literally nothing, and they are forced to evacuate those places. Impacts of mining coal: it causes scarring and disruption of the area, makes the area very ugly. Erosion increases if reclamation is not done properly. Subsidence, that is sinkholes, are created. Toxins are released like dust, gas, drainage. Possible pollution elements are air, water as well as soil. Acid mine drainage, especially sulfur. Slurry, that is coal waste, pond overflow. So, this coal waste has a huge thing that is collected in a pond, that refers to as the slurry pond, and most of the time this pond overflows, affecting the river as well as the land. Water loss and pollution: altered hydrological and hydrogeological regimes, that is decrease of water level, increased heavy metals, acidity or pollution, increased turbidity, that is the water gets more turbid, in the sense the more suspended solids are there in it and no longer remains clear. Risk of groundwater contamination, and that is the worst kind of contamination, because groundwater cannot be tested easily, it cannot be studied very easily, and once it is used for irrigation, we will not know the consequences of it till we actually face the consequences. Air pollution, increased ambient particulates, that is dust, increased ambient sulfur dioxide, that is SO2, increased ambient oxides of nitrogen, NOx, which is very, very bad for agriculture and produce, increased ambient heavy metals. Species and habitat loss, loss of entire ecosystems, habitats and functions related to them, loss of endemic and or threatened species, loss of important plant species with potential to cure other illnesses like diseases like AIDS or cancer. Impacts on service values, loss of access to timber, that is other plants that are growing around there, medicinal plants, fuel, wood, etc. Loss of access to grazing for livestock, impaired ecosystem services, that is soil and flood protection, watershed protection, climate modification. So, when you look at an area or a mine, it is not only that particular area that is going to get affected, but quite a large surrounding area that is going to be impacted. So, what are the main needs for sustainable development of mines? Again, this is like something we cannot ignore and say we do not need mines, we do not need ores. Without basic minerals and ores, we won't be able to function in a suitable way, let it be right from our electricity to the gas that we consume for cooking, everything we require and some kind of ore or mineral. So, we actually have to make sure that let's do about it in a sustainable manner. Yes, money and economics play an important role, but we shouldn't be paying a heavier price in terms of sacrificing the environment or the lives of people. So, we have to have a joint study. We need to integrate the economic activity along with environmental integrity, and this practice has to be recognized. This integration will recognize sustainable development. Yeah, it should be financially profitable, technically appropriate, environmentally sound and socially responsible. Sustainability principles have application for all stages of mine cycle: exploration, mine planning, construction, mineral extraction, mine closure, post closure, reclamation and rehabilitation. So, sustainability has to go from every phase of mining, let it be choosing the site for mining to the very end of rehabilitation. The environmental damage caused by mining activities are as follows: devegetation and defacing of landscape, subsidence on lands, that is you have these sinkholes that are created, groundwater contamination. At the end of this lecture, we have looked into the benefits and problems of dams. We have studied mineral resources, the use and overexploitation, environmental effects of extracting and mining. At the end of this lecture, we should be able to answer the following questions. Discuss the different uses of minerals. What are some of the major minerals of India? What are the environmental impacts of mineral extractions? What are the common perceptions regarding mining? That brings us to the end of this lecture. Thank you.